Grind Game Chalk Talk. I'm your host, Ron McKeefery. This is episode number 42, and excited to bring you Chad Wesley Smith from Juggernaut Training Systems on the show today. I've been following Chad's blog, jtsstrength.com for quite some time, and wanted to get him on the show, talk a little bit about, his journey and the mentors that he's had, the Juggernaut Training Method. He's written a couple of books that I've read on it, and some good stuff there. Dealing with the high school athlete, multi-sport athlete, and then just kind of, he's a powerlifter. He's a American record holder in the squat. He's two-time national shot put champion, and obviously he's the founder of Juggernaut Training Systems Methods, but wanted to get his take on, the 8-week college program and, how the loading and the programming would go, for the powerlifts, the bench, the squat, how to get those numbers up for our athletes. But, it's a great episode. It goes into a lot of fantastic stuff. So I know you're really going to enjoy it. As usual, I want to make sure that we recognize our sponsors. We have both Elite Form and Ignition this year sponsoring the show. And Ignition, it's combine time, and these guys do it the right way. They do a fantastic job of a holistic approach to approaching their athletes, both the mind, the body, and the spirit. And this had some great success at the combine. They're gearing up for their NFL prep training, where they have a lot of guys in town, and they have a fantastic speed certification for us coaches that are listening. So I think that would be a great thing to look into. I'd encourage you to go to their Facebook page, like their Facebook page, so you can get up the updates and stay on up with different things that they have going on. Really just some fantastic guys there, and I know that you would get a lot out of that. So sit back and enjoy this episode, and I'll see you on the flip side. All right, guys, back with Chad Wesley Smith. Excited to have him on the show. Been working on this for a while. Schedules finally kind of worked out together here, and was able to nail him down. So, Chad, appreciate you coming on the show, man.
Hey, thanks for having me, Ron.
Chad, for the guys that don't know you as well, kind of go into your journey, kind of how you got into strength and conditioning on the get-go, and what you're doing now.
All right. For me, I guess really started in high school. I've controlled my own program almost exclusively since I was 14 years old, since I was a freshman in high school. And I didn't have a strength coach. Our football coaches were football coaches, so it was just always something that even from a really young age, like watching Arnold Schwarzenegger movies with my older brothers and stuff, that I was just into, like Rocky IV training montage. I think it was like a life-changing moment for me the first time I saw that. So even from that point, I was just going online and reading articles, and I think for a 14-year-old at the time, and really figured stuff out pretty well. But it was more just that I did so much stuff that if you do so much, you got to do some good stuff. So from there, just going through high school playing football and doing track, and then into college throwing the shot put. When I transferred schools and came back to a school closer to where I grew up, transferring from Cal to a small school, Concordia, in Orange County, that I took back over control of my own training, as well as coaching at the high school that I had went to. So I coached football as well as running their off-season program and coaching track. So that at 19, or maybe just having turned 20 years old, gave me the opportunity to do a lot of trial and error with a pretty big group, and just continue to develop my philosophies. And then as soon as I graduated college in 2009, went right into creating a business plan for Juggernaut, and about 3 months later, the doors were open, and things were just going like 1,000 miles an hour. And a lot of stuff, from the business end of it, learning on the fly. And then, with my own competition, I threw the shot put about just under 64 feet in college, and then competed 1 year as a post-collegiate and threw just under 66 feet there, 20 meters exactly. So, but just kind of ran out of time to compete in track and field at the level that I wanted to, so transitioned to powerlifting. Squatted 905 pounds and belt and knee wraps, the American record in the 308s class. And that's the real American record, not the American record for this federation or that federation. It's the American record for all the federations. So if you keep saying you got a world record, but it's only for a federation, stop that, whoever you are watching and listening. All right. And then Strongman won the 2012 North American Amateur Nationals and became a professional there, and just kind of go back and forth competing in those. So I'd say, with what I do now with Juggernaut Training Systems, trying to help athletes and coaches just become better educated in all aspects of training, that it's really a reflection of my background as someone who, didn't have a coach necessarily to teach him about it, so I had to go, whether it was clinics, which something I've been doing since I was 19 years old, or, just reading articles, or, pestering older coaches with emails and phone calls, or at track meets, or, wherever I could find them. It's just a kind of a conglomeration of my experiences in all these different sports and different aspects, whether it's coach or athlete or,
sure,
whatever it is that I do now.
Well, you hit 2 points that were really key there. Obviously, one, experience is the best teacher. A lot of times, it's learning what not to do by your own trial and error. Sometimes that teaches the best teacher. And then the other thing I heard you say that was key is you got to seek out the experts. When you got a question, don't just stand there and just ponder it. Go and find the answer somehow, some way. And I know you did that. Who were some of the mentors and some of the coaches that you sought out, and some of the biggest influences in how you coach now?
All right. So certainly the biggest influence in the development of Juggernaut was Joe DeFranco. Even when I was still in college, my older brother lives in New York, so it was half to visit him, but don't tell him, but it was really the coach Joe DeFranco. So, going over and just spending the day there was such like an inspiring thing for me. And, I read every single article on there and watched every video. And then, for people who are more familiar with Juggernaut stuff currently, this maybe is a weird thing for them to say, but, West Side stuff was a really big influence on me, as well as reading articles on Elite FTS. Mm-hmm. The way that I think about training now compared to the way I thought about it then has definitely evolved a lot. And I'd say the biggest catalyst in that was James Smith, who, after working at Pitt, when they had a coaching change and brought in some different people than he and Buddy, he came out and worked for me at Juggernaut for about 10 months. And, that was like a master's course, maybe probably beyond a master's course, just sitting and, talking with him every day, and the insights I've gained there. Joe DeFranco, James Smith are the real big ones as far as people that I actually know and have interacted with. Brian Fetzer, he's the head track coach at University of Virginia. He and I are good friends, and especially with speed training stuff, he's been a great influence. And then, all those guys really just leading me to, reading more from Charlie Francis, probably number one, as far as the read, and then Anatoly Bondarchuk. Whether it's his writings or stuff from Martin Binnister, Tony Torelli, just the idea of special strength and, choosing exercises with a high dynamic correspondence and great transfer of training. And then, just being able to extrapolate those ideas of what he presented for throwers, hammer throwers particularly, and being able to take those ideas and apply them to football players or MMA fighters. But, training football players is definitely what I'm most passionate about and what I really enjoy. So
Sure. Well, you have a couple of books that you've written and on the Juggernaut Training System. And what I really enjoy about it is exactly that. It's not a powerlifting or a strongman training program that you just plug in and play in football. It's actually a sport application. It's that special strength incorporated into it. And so what exactly is the Juggernaut Training System, and what makes it different than maybe some of the other protocols that people are using?
All right. Well, so Juggernaut Training Systems is the name of the company now, which really began as me just training athletes in person, but now has really grown to more this online entity, which is representing a lot of different methods. Juggernaut Training Systems promotes the cube method or promotes the other things. So mine personally was Juggernaut Method. So Juggernaut Method is going to be different from other. Well, the program itself is really just a submaximal program based on accumulation, or based on getting a big training stimulus through the accumulation of volume and high quality work, and moving the bar fast. But as you look at the book, Juggernaut Method 2.0, I think the Juggernaut Method itself is a good program. But what I'm really trying to present more in the book is the reasoning of why I do, why I make certain decisions in the training of athletes. Because if I was to just give them, a program and say, do this many sets and reps on this day at this percentage, and so on, but not the why behind why I'm making those decisions, that program is going to be good for however long it's good for, right. And then when someone's done with it, they got to go to something else. So rather than just being prescriptive in sets and reps, I'm trying to be descriptive in the rationale behind why I'm choosing to do the sets and reps, and why we're going to jump on these days at this point in the year and sprint on these days, and why that changes later in the year, and why the conditioning is structured that way, and an understanding of energy systems, and the way that they need to be applied at different parts of the annual plan for the athlete, football player in particular. So I think that's what really sets it apart from other books that you're reading from, particularly strength athletes, whether Olympic lifters, strongmen, powerlifters, that I think I have a deeper understanding of the demands of sport. Football being a multifaceted sport rather than powerlifting or Olympic lifting, which is just testing one quality. So
sure. Well, let's talk a little bit about the programming piece of that. I mean, you talk about submaximal effort, and I know that Windler was an influence with this 5-3-1 model. You kind of take it a little bit further, and you add a 10 rep and an 8 rep, and it's what was the reasoning behind adding the more volume in your loading?
Adding the more volume is really just from the standpoint of people need more practice at it. Unless you're very strong, doing 5-3-1 as it's prescribed, you're just not going to be able to get the necessary stimulus from just 3 sets, from 3 main work sets. So I've actually laid out in a couple articles like sort of extended 5-3-1 protocols, which are like 5 sets of 5 instead of 3 sets of 5. 5 sets of 3 instead of 3 sets of 3, and then a 5-4-3-2-1 instead of just 5-3-1. Particularly young athletes, they need more practice on the lifts. They need to build more. They need to build more muscle. So that's really the reason with the higher volume. Sure. I think people are afraid of volume. They're afraid of like overtraining or whatever, but volume is just such an overlooked component of the training. Everyone wants to just push the intensity, but intensity can only go to 100%. Like you can only do so much there. So then you need to look at other factors to manipulate continued progress, whether that's volume, frequency, rest periods, particularly in Juggernaut Method 2.0 with the inverted Juggernaut Method, which I definitely prefer, which would be like 10 sets of 5 instead of 5 sets of 10.
Yeah.
Using those controlled rest periods is a great way to build work capacity. And so for the football player, that would be general work capacity. But for the powerlifter, it would be special work capacity. That was a big thing for me. I mean, improving as a powerlifter was getting on those controlled rest periods and making myself very uncomfortable by doing it. But it was very helpful.
Yeah, as a competitive athlete yourself, and going through and working with a lot of high school athletes, I know when you were developing this program, a consideration was obviously the in-sport athlete. The high school athlete that's going from football to wrestling to baseball or track, and kind of always in season. How and I know you talked about it in the book, but for the listeners, explain how the system's set up in a way to where you can deal with an athlete that's in season for 9 months of the year.
Yeah, so with the in-season athletes, I think the real important things to consider, and what's discussed in the book, is that sport practice is a tremendous stimulus to the athlete. And I think sport coaches and strength coaches tend to too often compartmentalize the idea of training. They think, all right, this is practice. The football coach or basketball coach, whatever, thinks, all right, practice is practice, and then when they go in the weight room, that's training. But the body doesn't understand that. The body doesn't know what a squat is, or a deadlift, or power clean, or tackling drill. It just knows stimulus and stress. So that, I think, is the first important thing to understand, that for an in-season athlete, you need to respect what they're doing as sport practice, as just training, and as stimulus to the body, and that has the ability to impact their training positively or negatively, depending on how you organize the whole situation. So with that being said, these sports are all being played on their feet. No one's running around on their hands. So the stimulus, through sprints and jumps and change of direction and all that kind of stuff that happens in practice and games, they're getting more stimulus to the lower body. So that needs to be reflected accordingly in their general work, their weight room work. So because they're getting more stimulus to the lower body and having to do more work on the lower body, in the subsequent days, you can reduce the volume of their lower body work. Either reduce the volume or reduce the intensity, but keep really look to get strengthen the general organism, as Charlie Francis would put it, but just get their strength stimulus from improved upper body work. So let's say if the plan in the off season would be to do 5 work sets of the bench and 5 work sets of the squat, you could stay with those 5 work sets of the bench and keep the intensity pretty similar to what it would be in the off season period, but then reduce the lower body work to maybe 3 sets or 2 sets, or bring the percentages down. A lot of different adjustments can be made. One of the things that I really like is just changing the exercise selection to still make your athletes feel like they're working hard, but not taxing them in the same way.
Sure.
And that could be, the most common decision I make there is to go from, back squatting to box squatting, or back squatting to front squatting, or front box squatting, because, no one can front squat as much as they can back squat. So you can put less weight on the bar, which is going to be just less stressful to the athlete, even though it may represent a higher percentage of their front squat max compared to their back squat max. So it's going to feel hard for them. And particularly with high school athletes and a little bit less college athletes, that basal instinct of like, man, this workout kicked my ass, that makes them feel like they're working hard and they like to work hard. So it's going to make them feel like they're continuing to get stronger, even though, as a coach, I know that it's not going to have quite the same effect. But psychological is such a big component of things.
That makes complete sense. The when obviously, when you're out, when you're in a private setting or personal strength coach, you got kind of the all methods and time and logistics and everything is kind of optimal. Put yourself in a college setting, or what are some of the mistakes that maybe that you're seeing in a 8-week college off season for football, or you mentioned not respecting practice as a stimulus. I think that's a great point. But what are some of the other things that you're seeing as trends, being on the outside looking in?
I actually wrote an article maybe a month, 6 weeks ago called "The Problem with Strength and Conditioning," and college coaches and high school coaches have a lot of things they have to deal with that I don't have to deal with in a private setting, but the things that I see them being able to control, that they're dropping the ball on a little bit, is a lack of program management, which is really the idea of practice, so special physical preparation or specific work and general work, weight room, sprints, all that kind of stuff, not being cohesively managed. And it's tough when you got a coach dealing with a bunch of other teams, and you got to communicate with the head coach, and they're the boss, so it pretty much just becomes the onus being on the strength coach to react to what happened at practice that day. If the guys were screwing up and they had to run extra, you have to take that into account and let their general work reflect that. Which is just not an ideal model, because it's so common for coaches to of course, periodize the work that they're doing in the weight room or sprinting or jumping or whatever it is. It's a much less common idea for the sport coach to periodize, the volume and intensity of different drills and, how much inside run they're doing. And it's also tougher to quantify that work, outside of just reps and all right, this is, full go, or we're taking guys to the ground here, whatever it was. So that's kind of the first step, is that the communication between the coaches needs to be improved, and that the planning on both ends needs to be done harmoniously. So that's kind of step one. Step two issues that I see is just a lack of understanding or lack of attention to energy system work. Understanding, what energy systems are at play in a football game. And where you really run into this, I think, is football being an alactic aerobic sport, but coaches wanting to do lactic-based work, whether that's just endless sled pushes or 300-yard shuttles, gassers, basically stuff that's going to make the athlete puke. And I understand that there's a mental toughness component to football, and I understand that that kind of shared struggle kind of bonds a team together, but how much of that is necessary, and how do you weigh that versus the detriment it has to the athlete, to the more important qualities of the athlete, like their alactic power, so their maximum sprinting speed and their maximum strength, because those two things fly in the face of each other. Doing highly lactic work and doing alactic power work, so better, there's more effective punishment tools and stuff like that exists. I understand that that's gotta happen. When I was coaching high school football, I dealt with the same kind of thing, but it needs to be managed. It needs to be managed better, and I don't even know that I have a great solution for it, but I know enough to say that we need to work to find a better solution for it. So it's that improper exercise selection. I'm not a big proponent of the Olympic lifts for football players. They're not necessary to do. If you have someone who's already good at them, great. I think they're really good lifts, but in the scenario that you're talking about, 8 weeks to get guys ready to go, is it worth it to spend, and this is a very low end estimate, 2 of those weeks, learning the lifts to be able to create some output for 6 weeks. And of course, it's going to be an entire year process. Sure. But when you have someone who's trying to learn so many, they have so many things that they need to do, is it worth it spending that time on lifts that the same thing or very, very close to the same qualities can be developed by jumps and medicine ball throws and sprints, which of course they have to know how to sprint. That's a part of the game. They have to do that.
Right.
And then jumping and throwing, they can learn that very quickly, especially in comparison, and develop all the same qualities, and in some cases I think actually better qualities with like throwing exercises, because it can happen through so many different planes of movement, where Olympic lift is just a vertical. You can take a med ball throw and throw it for height, for distance, rotationally, just through so many different specific movement patterns. So that, and then I think just doing a better job with the athlete's nutrition and educating them and monitoring that, and that's going to be all of these things are going to be different from school to school. So sure. I don't want that to be an indictment of like, I think all these college strength coaches are doing a terrible job. No, they're great coaches. There are coaches who could be doing a much better job too. So those four qualities: the program management, and proper energy system work, better exercise selection, and then monitoring the nutrition of the athletes.
Yeah, I think obviously, like you said, I mean, obviously each situation is different, and you have to kind of work within the systems, But I think it's important as coaches, we always ask people to get a fresh perspective, and so I appreciate that. Being a 905-pound squatter, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you, about in that 8-week cycle, what is a loading structure? If you were to walk into a college football setting, and you've got 8 weeks to get these guys stronger on a squat, what's week 1 look like? What's test day look like?
All right. Well, I think the first thing I want to say with that is it's all got to work in conjunction: sprinting, jumping, squatting.
Oh yeah.
I like the Charlie Francis axiom that weights follow speed. So the most important thing they got to do is sprint. That's going to be the best stimulus to the body, and it's going to be most important because they sprint on the football field. They don't squat, right, with a bar on their back on the football field. So all that working harmoniously is key. From there, assuming that athletes all have good technique, they're not going to have necessarily powerlifter, weightlifter, great squatting technique, but good enough so that they can keep putting weight on the bar and not, worry about getting injured. So from there, like I said, it's all got to work together. So it's a little tough for me to just put it in there. But in the early part of the off season, you're gonna work with higher volume in everything, and I prefer to get that through frequency. So maybe they'd be squatting 2 or 3 times a week early in the year, and doing hill work for their speed work, which is going to be less taxing to their body, less taxing their nervous system because they're not going as fast, so they can do it more frequently, and it's not as stressful to the hamstrings either. So if you're squatting more, and the hamstrings are just more sore, they're doing the hill work is going to lessen the chance for like a soft tissue injury, like a hamstring pull. And then over the course of the off season, you got to consolidate stressors. Everything, the intensity of everything is going to go up. You're going to move from hill sprints to flatland sprints to maybe some flying work, like submaximal lead in to a max speed section. That's more taxing. You're going to start putting more weight on the bar. Doing lower volume. That's more taxing to the body and the nervous system. And when you're doing more taxing things, then recovery is more at a premium. So you can't sprint 3 times a week and squat 3 times a week anymore. You gotta take it down to 2 and 2, and just move things to a more focused plan. So an 8-week plan, it's not going to be anything. It's not going to be anything revolutionary.
Right.
I don't have like a real sexy answer for it. Like let's do this kind of complex work or this kind of special loading, because I really just don't think that's necessary. What I would do is early in the year, if I was early in that 8 weeks, let's say for the first 3 weeks, I'd squat 3 times a week, and 2 back squat days and 1 front squat day. Maybe one of those back squat days are pause squats, and I'd work on a low, high, medium volume structure. So on Monday, maybe they're doing 4 sets of 3 to 5 reps as their low day, and then on Wednesdays the high day, and they're going to do 8 sets of 3 to 5 reps, and then on Friday is the medium day, and they're going to do 6 sets of 3 to 5 reps, and keeping all those at relatively, at the relative intensity from day to day would be the same. Early in that year, I'd want to work mostly in the 60 to 75% range. Mm-hmm. All right, and then let's say for the next 3 weeks, we'd go down to squatting twice a week, and increase the volume again. So let's say we'd have one back squat day and 1 front squat day. That back squat day is going to be 4 or 5 sets, still in that 3 to 5 rep range. That's kind of where I'm going to stay the whole year, and just increasing the intensity. So if we're at 60 to 75 before, now we're going to go up into the 70 to 85% range. But again, I'm not super concerned with my football players having a great squat. I want them to squat well, and I want their gains in the squat to reflect in what I see as more important tests. Their movement tests, the sprinting, jumping, change of direction. Right. But I don't want to chase the squat number for the sake of the squat number for like my own ego, really. So, as we get into that middle part of the year, we're going to be into more intensive speed work. So now moving from the hill to the flat land, they're moving faster. That's a greater stimulus to their body. That's going to yield better strength gains, and we're going to be doing jumping work to reflect this as well. So now we're through 6 weeks, and then those last 2 weeks, if you want to test the 8th week, I'd actually take a deload the 7th week and then test the 8th week. But you're just going to consolidate it again. To it could be 1 day of squatting, but I think the football guys should stay with 2 days the whole time. It's just going to be, you're just going to change, just take some of the focus off the front squat that secondary day, and just if the back squat's your primary exercise. That's another thing with exercise selection. And sometimes the coaches get caught up in like, all right, we're all. I actually see it more with guys getting caught up with the front squat, like that they just want a front squat, and saying the front squat is more functional for the football player than the back squat, which just isn't true. Neither of them. Well, first you have to. If you want to call something functional, you need to define what the person's function is. Sure. And a football player's function is not to front squat or back squat; it's to play football. Sure. And both of those are general exercises. And I think that dynamic correspondence between the two, the difference is very negligible. So I don't really care about front squat, back squat, box squat, safety squat, bar squat. They're all general exercises for the football player. So you just want to pick one. 1 or 2 that the athlete can do well, so they can create some output on it, and that they can, be safe doing, so that their technique looks good. Because it doesn't matter if you have a football player who squats 800 pounds and runs a 4.340. If he's injured, he's on the sideline, so who cares? I agree. So I think that's an important thing to consider with it as well.
Well, that's good stuff, man. Well, hey, I know you're busy. I don't want to get you out of here, but we always kind of finish things off with some recommendations. Obviously, I'm gonna link up your website and the books and all that. I think they're great resources for everybody to grab. But give me another book and a website and app recommendation that you like to go check out.
App guy, I'm not a big app guy. I really just on Facebook and stuff. Book recommendation from a training standpoint, Transfer of Training, Dr. Bondarchuk, Anatoly Bondarchuk, that's a great one. Website stuff, I think the energy system training is so important for football players. I'd say 8weeksout.com, which is Joel Jameson, great stuff. James Smith's website, Power Development Inc., tons of great articles on there. Make sure to bring your notepad and be ready to reread some things a few times over. Another book recommendation, not so much a training book, but just for coaches. It's probably my favorite book ever. It's called Season of Life.
Yeah.
It's by Jeffrey Marks with Joe Ehrman. And just especially, I mean, I think great coaches are in it for more than, wins and losses and putting weight on the guy's bench or improving his 40. That you set out to work with these young men and women to positively impact their lives. And, Season of Life is a great book to understand how to do that better. Also, really like when the game stands tall about De La Salle.
Yeah.
I was like, De La Salle is like the pinnacle to me of just what coaching should be and what, especially high school football, should be about. So I really enjoy that. So. Yeah,
those are all good, man. Well, hey, brother, I appreciate you spending the time with us and sharing some information. And I'd encourage everybody to go get your resources and check out your website because it's fantastic. And
thank you.
Really appreciate what you're doing for the profession and your willingness to share with everybody, brother.
Oh, thanks for having me on here, Ron.
All right, guys, a couple quick things before we let you go. For the show notes for this episode and all the others, go to ronmckeefery.com. And while you're there, join me in the comments section, just letting Chad know how much we appreciate him coming on the show and sharing his information with us. While you're there at the website, make sure you join the mailing list. That way you get updates each week on the latest Iron Game Chalk Talk episode as well as the Tribe TV video. If you are an iTunes person or YouTube, depending on how you're getting to these episodes, if you wouldn't mind, leave me a rating and review while you're there. I truly appreciate it. For Chad's book, the Juggernaut Method 2.0, and he's got a football one as well, go to the jtsstrength.com and click the store there. And make sure you check out Ignition's Facebook page, our sponsor. Just let them know how much you appreciate them helping to bring this show to you for free. So check back next week for another great episode, and we'll talk to you then. Take care.